Like if you are in the mindset of I'm losing weight even before you've lost a pound, you're setting yourself in such a different way. One thought, it's just one word difference. We're taking out the want, we're taking out the need. But that shift is everything because it totally changes, again, that energy that you bring with you into the action that you take. And that's everything.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Defense Never Rests. Welcome to 2021. I am Trisha Baxter, your host. Joining me as co-host, Talar Herculean Corsi. Talar, what is going on?
I don't know. It's a crazy new world that we're living in, right? But now that 2020 is over, no COVID, no pandemic, everything is good and rosy, right? That's all it takes is
Yeah,
just
it's just
midnight.
the drop of the ball and COVID has gone away and everyone is back at work. Everything's peachy keen right now.
Yeah, except it's like one of my favorite authors, Eckhart Tolle, says, there is no good or bad, there just is. And if we really dumped 2020, then we would dump all the good that came out of it, which is the two of us meeting, writing our book together, being on podcasts together, and all the other great things that came out of it. So yeah, we'll just keep going. We'll take the good and we'll dump the
Yeah,
bad.
I think listen, I've been on the phone with people that have had just the past couple weeks some really bad experiences with death and just a
Mm,
variety of things. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that people are suffering and struggling right now, but I know that there has been a lot of good that has come out of 2020. And like you said, we don't want to just dump it and say it was completely bad. Remembering and taking note of the good is important too. But for this episode, we have left 2020 behind. We are focusing on 2021. And what is everybody doing right now but looking at goals, setting goals, doing a reset of their life, of their career in whatever way they want to or whatever feels natural. So we decided to do a podcast about goals. And for that, your and I's favorite life coach, Olivia Vizacaro, she was on our podcast probably about 6 months ago. I don't even remember. And it's what she has to say is fascinating because it really is your goals start from within, and taking the time to look at what's going on within really is important. So we're going to sit down today and talk to her about the right way to set goals, the right way to go about implementing your goals, and making sure that your mind is right as you start this new year. So let's go ahead and bring her in. Well, welcome, Olivia. Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me, both of you. I'm wonderful. And yourself?
2021, it's going to be a great year. I feel it. So there's this energy that's running through my body that I'm like, bring it on. Let's do it.
Yeah, we're ready. Same.
So I wanted to do obviously it's our first episode of 2021. And what is everybody talking about now, which is goals, setting goals, honoring goals, figuring them out, whatever terminology that you want to use. And I'm not a big fan of the New Year's goal, but I think it has some merit. So let's talk about goals. That's our episode today. And I wanted you to come on, Olivia, because I think your mindset approach is so needed and welcomed and helpful here when it comes to setting them. So let's start with, let's talk about the act of setting goals. Is there a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it? What are your thoughts on that?
There is a right way to do it. So I think first and foremost, you want to intentionally be setting a goal that you can work towards and plan around. So I like to start with the result that you ultimately want to create and really reverse engineer that process, work it backwards. So break it down into as many digestible action items as you possibly can, because then you really get a roadmap for accomplishing your goal rather than kind of blindly throwing darts at a goal. While blindfolded, once you break it down into the specific action items, you really have like follow the yellow brick road to accomplishing the goal. So find the result that you ultimately want to create and then reverse engineer it. What are all of the things individually that you would need to do in order to get that accomplished result at the end of the day. And then from there, plan all of those things, right? Some of them might be sequential. You might not be able to do one thing before you do something else. So you're going to see that roadmap really start to take place. And then from there, once you have all of the action items lined up, I like to guess how long each item will take you. So you really have more of a plan of action as far as timing, how long something's going to take, what commitment it's going to require from you. And then you schedule it. It goes on the calendar and you honor the calendar rather than either having just a free floating to-do list, or worst case scenario, you just have it all in your brain kind of tangled up with everything else that you have to remember throughout the days and weeks. And that's how we start off really strong in January and get to March. And it's like, what was my goal again? I don't even remember. So really coming up with a concrete action plan from reverse engineering the result. Then we want to think about, how do we need to feel in order to accomplish that, in order to take all of that action. And in order to figure out how we need to feel, we need to figure out what we need to think about it. And I think this is what a lot of people miss out on talking about when it comes to goals setting and accomplishing, of like, how do you think about your goals? How do you talk to them? Do you say nice things to them? Or is it a lot of limiting beliefs? Would you want your goals, if they were people, to hear what you said about them behind closed doors? Does it look like a lot of, I don't think I can do this, it's too much of a reach, it's impossible, I probably won't be successful? Like, all that negative chatter is going to make you feel really discouraged, really unmotivated, really unfocused. And that's not going to drive that action that we just talked about. So you want to make sure that you're talking about your goals in a positive way in order to create a positive result, not vice versa.
Your approach should be start with the result, right?
Mhm.
What result do you want? And I think part of that is a mindset journey, because how do you find what result do you want? Are you focusing in on the right result? Because if you're focusing in on a result that you think you should have, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Correct.
How do you find the result? Because it's really about focusing in on the result that's true to who you are, that you really want, and not what you think you should want. How do you go about doing that?
So I like to ask, what's your why for anything? So if you're like finding a result and you're testing that, you're like running it through the brain to see, like, is this really a goal that I want to achieve? Or is it just a should thought? Is it something that I think I should achieve, but I don't really want it? You've probably heard me say to you before, do you want it or do you want to want it? Right? This is I think the easiest way to describe this is like for people who want to lose weight. That's been a big one for me too.
Guilty.
Like, yeah, I want to lose weight. I don't actually want to. Truly wanting to looks like doing it. Wanting to want it looks like thinking a lot about it, but not really making any change in order to create that ultimate result. So finding out what your why is, seeing how committed you are to it. And I think our whys break down into two different categories. The first is external pressures versus the second, internal desires. And your hard whys coming from internal desires, something that you truly do want for your own sake, not because it's something society thinks you should do, or any of those things. None of the shoulding, the true desire, the true wants. I think that's a great place to be setting goals from. That's super intentional. That's going to be aligned really in integrity with kind of the life that you want to create. And if you can categorize them, external pressures would look like what society thinks that I should do, what family members think I should do, what friends would support, worrying about what other people think, rather than what you truly want. I think you can have them break down into those two categories. So from there, you want to be setting goals from internal desire, from an intentional place.
I have why on my mind right now because I've been reading Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. And I don't know if you guys have read it, but he has such amazing stories in there about the difference between the whys and the motivation. And the recent one that I read was the difference between Langley and the Wright brothers and why the Wright brothers made it and Langley didn't. You know, Langley had all the money, he had all the resources and the connections, and the Wright brothers were these nobodies, but Langley's why was to be famous. It was just this external motivation to be famous and to be the first one to get it. Whereas the Wright brothers wanted to change the world. And that's how they got all these people invested and involved in it, and were able to be successful. How do you, I was going to go to the example of like losing weight. You know, what if that is what you think you want, or you want to want? Is that the right goal, or is it, being healthy, or feeling comfortable in your clothes, or feeling confident? Like, how do you talk to your goal and be like, are you really the right goal, or should I be dating the other goal? Or how many other goals are behind you that might be the right goal for me? How do you speed date your goal to know you've found the right one?
I love that. Speed dating your goal. That's fantastic. I'm totally stealing that.
Think about how you want to feel about a goal, right? So I think that brings us back to our why, but like a why is really a thought. A why is a reason. I don't think there are any good or bad whys necessarily. It's kind of a personal preference. I just think you should know your whys and like them, right? If fame can be your why, if that resonates with you, if that's enough of a reason, if it really drives and compels you. I think that's probably my favorite emotion to cultivate when it comes to setting and accomplishing goals, is the feeling of compelled. What can I think about my goal that makes me feel compelled? Because that will drive massive action. That's not, casually talking to, that's like committed full on relationship with a goal. So I really look for goals that I have a hard enough why to where I feel compelled to take action. But you can test it. If it's a goal that makes you feel so discouraged because you think it's so impossible, I don't know that that's the right goal for you, because it's not going to move the marker at all, right? You're not going to get excited. So you want something that feels within reach, something that is enough of a stretch though to where you feel challenged. Because think about something like, what we can even use the weight example, like to lose 2 pounds might not, be a big enough difference to you in order for you to really go about and make a significant change. So finding something that is enough of a stretch to where you're challenged, to where you have to do something, have to maybe think about something differently, is a better way to go about it.
I think that's so fascinating, because you do have to spend some time in the space of not just writing down your goals, but figuring out the why. If it's coming from an external source, I've done this for years, where many of my goals were people pleasing goals.
Mhm.
Like, I'm going to do this because I'm going to get, especially in the firm context, I'm going to market because I'm going to make the firm this much money, versus now it's very different why behind it. Maybe the same actions, but it's driven by something entirely different. And because of it, I bring an entirely different energy to it that people feel and pick up on and make it more effective. So taking the time when you first, if this is the time of year when you are setting your goals, is to really think through that why is important.
One of the things that has really made me feel good about my job and my role. I mean, I work for a car dealership, Vista Ford Lincoln in Southern California, located in Oxnard and Woodland Hills, ready to serve all your sales and service needs at any time. But one of the questions I did have, and we can go back to it if I don't know which lane you want to drive in. Again, pun intended.
Whatever,
We're totally
whatever
talking
lane
about
you want.
driving. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, let me get down to third gear. I'm just full of it today, aren't I? What I was going to ask about is, and I totally get that. I mean, I never thought about the psychology of it before. Before goal setting was like a to-do list. You wrote it down and you mark some of them, you don't. But I never thought about the psychology behind it until I started working with Olivia and thinking, you need to stay motivated in order to accomplish your goals, right? And then having the right feeling and the right thinking. And so, but what I was going to say earlier is, or the question I was going to ask, is there some point that you are okay with ditching a goal to say, you know what, tall, dark, and handsome goal, you're not the right one. It's really the, other cowboy I should have been dating for my goal.
I think that this goes back to kind of the same conversation we just had about what decision-making process you're going through and setting your goal, know and like your reasons. Okay. Know and like your reasons for abandoning a goal. And what I find is super common is that you can track the thought process of goals that get neglected or abandoned. And typically it looks like this. I used to be a bit of an entrepreneur when I was younger as well, and I abandoned goals back then. So I've studied this myself, and in all of the coaching that I've done, coaching other coaches, seeing them shift or abandon niches or business goals, jumping from like one thing to another, really being non-committal with their goals, I see the same pattern of thinking. So if you take the idea or whatever the goal was, and you see the thinking process initially, like right before you set it or right around the time that you set it. So let's say it's to make $100,000 in a year. Okay. And that's just an easy, mathematical number. So in the beginning, you're like, I think I can do that. It'll be so amazing if I accomplish that. I've got it in me. That's kind of all of the thinking. This might be fun. It's going to be a challenge, but I'm excited to tackle it. That's the thinking in the beginning. Then you start to go into the year, and January doesn't go so hot. January is kind of slow. And then your brain starts to wonder, like, am I doing the right things? Am I not doing the right things? I don't know thinking, which typically leads to confusion, which isn't motivated. That's not compelled. That's not going to fuel that massive action, right? So a lot of second guessing starts, that brain chatter comes in. And then it goes from, I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't know if I'm doing and going about this the right way, to this isn't working. And that frustration that comes from thinking this isn't working normally leads to people quitting. So the thought would be, this isn't working. The feeling would be really discouraged, maybe disappointed even. And you're either taking the same action, kind of like what Trisha said, from a different feeling, right? Looks the same, but if you're taking it while you're feeling discouraged or while you're feeling disappointed, that's going to come through in everything that you do after that. So, or you just give up altogether because it's more comfortable to quit than it is to keep taking action and feel discouraged during that process. So there's always one of two problems that prevents anyone from accomplishing a goal, which I love this saying that I have, that there's always one of two problems: a thought you're thinking or a feeling you're unwilling to feel. Because once you know that, it's so easy to identify what the problem is. It's either limiting beliefs that you're thinking about your ability to accomplish the goal, or you're starting to feel discouraged. And like the hot potato, you're like, I don't want to feel discouraged. This feels awful. I'll just quit. Quitting lets me get out of discouraged really quickly. So if you're willing to bear through and like trudge through the river of misery and feel that discouragement for a while and keep at it, take action, like I like to say, in spite of and despite that negative emotion, you can get to the point where you accomplish it. So I like to see if like discouraged or disappointed is the reason you're abandoning the goal, or if there's really a valid desire of like, oh, I thought I was interested in this. Turns out I'm not. Turns out I was mistaken when I set this goal. I thought that I was really going to like reading 52 books, a different book each. That's a flippant goal, but I know people set that for the new year, right? I want to read more. It's like, why do you want to read more? Do you actually like to read, or do you just think like you should be more well-read, right? So depending on what your answer is there, deciding on whether that is a hard enough why for you to go through and have that be the goal that you set for the year, then you might find out in March, like, no, reading's not as exciting as I thought, or I'd rather spend my time doing something else. Time is finite, and I'd rather work on my business than just be reading, something like that.
How do you feel about when you do get to that place of discouragement? Do you have any kind of opinions or philosophy about, these meditation or mindfulness concepts are all about, feel your feelings and sit with it and look at it, and, don't try to just push them away or get past them. Do you have any opinions or tips on how do you handle that point? I'm sure everybody does. You get to that point, you're at discouragement. What should you do with discouragement?
So I think at that point, you need to take an audit of what you've done. And I have three parts to this. And I think this is really an integral part of goal setting and achievement, is to go through and really neutrally, not from judgment, but from curiosity, look at three things. first, what worked so far? Because our brain likes to go directly to the negative and sit in discouragement or that disappointment, because our brain likes to seek pleasure, avoid discomfort, and conserve energy. So it focuses on the negative in order to get you to stop taking action. I like to tell people your brain is not your best friend necessarily. Your brain's trying to protect you from the most immediate discomfort, which typically means not accomplishing a goal. So your job is to tolerate the immediate discomfort in order to get the long-term fulfillment of the goal achievement. But to look at starting with what worked. So don't let your brain be a negative Nelly. Really focus on the things that have gone well, that have worked. What you've learned is a really great way. I like to say you're always either winning or learning, that you're not failing at anything. So what have you learned? What's worked so far? Then we look from curiosity again, not from judgment. Judgment looks like I should have done it differently. I shouldn't be doing what I am doing, all of that negative self-talk. Looking at what didn't work. And then we solve for that. Again, from curiosity, which feels totally different, really open, really kind of in an inspired mental place of like, oh, kind of, it's so cliche, but Thomas Edison figured out, 2,000 ways to not build a light bulb. That really is kind of what this process looks like. Like, oh, I thought I was going to lose weight by doing this. Turns out that wasn't the case. I thought I was going to make $100,000 or whatever your goal is this way, but turns out that marketing avenue didn't pan out. Here's why I think that didn't work. Here's what did work about it. Here's what I learned. Here's what I'll go and do next. So what worked, what didn't work, and what you'll do differently. And then you apply whatever you came up with. And I like it to be very specific. I want it to be an actionable plan that you can put into place, not just like market better, right? Network more. Like, where are you going to network?
Healthier foods.
Yeah. Yeah, no, what are you going to have for lunch on a Monday, right? Like, let's make this be more specific. Are you going to meal plan? Are you not going to meal plan? Are you going to sign up for virtual networking? Because it's hard to do, it's a little bit more difficult to do things in person during COVID, but having very specific, like, I'm going to attend these 3 things. I'm going to have conversations with these 3 people. I'm going to pitch to, these clients, things like that. Very implementable.
I love that, because I think if you go into, we're first week in January, people are setting goals, putting their plans into place. If you go into it with a strong why and are aware that is going to be a point in your journey where discouragement or disappointment is going to happen, if you're aware of it, then you have that plan in place when you feel it. And it really does start there. It starts with being aware, one, that it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Very few journeys are discouragement or disappointment free. Lord, That would be nice. But it would
be lovely. It just unfortunately, just doesn't work that way.
It's not, and it's part of the journey. The discouragement and disappointment is where your growth happens. It's those moments that you want to quit, where you have to implement that 3 or 4 step question process. You have to pause and really be aware of the feeling that you're feeling before you just give up. It's super hard to do that. I mean, that's a thought. I know you're going to coach me on that as well. Maybe it's not that hard, but that is it, just to be aware of it before you go on this journey, that there are going to be moments that you're going to feel like you hit a brick wall and that there is no other option.
This is one of my favorite quotes. I got this from one of my coaches, but the concept, like, nothing's gone wrong here. Nothing's gone wrong here. Like, the disappointment showed up perfectly on time. The frustration showed up perfectly on time. The confusion showed up perfectly on time. And then it's like, now it's go time. I like to use the phrase gag and go. Like, the discomfort's here. Perfect. Like, I like to say, like, if you kind of feel vommy, we know we're in the right place. We know the goal's big enough. We know that, you're taking action that's outside of your comfort zone. Good. That's how you accomplish something new. If it's new, it's not going to be comfortable. Right. So when that negative emotion comes up, you're like, perfect. You arrived right on schedule. Now let's gag and go.
It reminds me another part of Simon Sinek's book, which I'm not getting royalties, commissions. Maybe I should. Maybe I'll get in touch with him for it. But he talks about the trapeze artist, who's going to be trying new daredevil stunts, and how he always has a net. He or she has a net when first trying out something that he or she has not done before. And so by having that safety net, it allows him or her to take more risk, to do more than he or she might otherwise. And so what you were referring to, Trish, earlier in terms of having the tools, the plan in place for when the discomfort arises, which it surely will, is like the safety net. And so it's like it would allow me to take more risk and be more aggressive and ambitious in my goals, knowing I have, this plan in place for when the discomfort arises, because I know it's going to. That I love that way of thinking, Olivia. Like you said, it happens just on time. It happens because it's supposed to. And it's like, Eckhart Tolle, why did it happen? Because it did.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it kind of reminds me, like when I look back, one of my more profound journeys has been, this is weird to say, my real estate journey. It has been a journey of self-awareness, just like any other thing that I've taken on. But my husband and I, 3 years ago, decided to start investing in real estate. We had a very strong why for it. We wanted financial independence. We wanted our passive income to exceed our expenses, so we had choice and flexibility over our lives. And we're not there yet, but it's been a 3-year journey. And through that 3-year journey, we have hit moments where I'm like, oh my God, this feels really uncomfortable, whether we've taken all of our cash and invested it or taken on an investment we weren't sure, which is what I'm doing right now. We took on a renovation investment. I'm not even sure how we're going to pay for it. Like, it feels really uncomfortable. And I have to recognize, all right, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this feeling, but my why is so strong that it creeps back in my head when I feel really uncomfortable and that self-doubt happens. It creeps back in. Trisha, remember why you're doing this. And it helps me stay centered and calm and get through those periods of uncomfortableness and doubt that you will face them. Every journey has them. So be prepared. I just wanted to relate my personal journey I'm not even sure that as I was going through it, I recognized that. I think my why was just that strong that it pulled me through it, that we never gave up. And when I got through that moment of uncomfortableness and doubt, I had a sense of clarity. I had a growth. I had confidence. I was like, wow, I figured that out. Like, I could do this. And then the next step we took was something we never envisioned we could take, because we had gone through that. It's a beautiful thing. I now am able to realize when we have moments of uncomfortableness that I'm like, oh, wow, something really cool is around the corner. I know
Totally.
it.
I really relate to that in my own entrepreneurship journey. So when I left the last firm that I was at and decided to just go out on my own and be fully self-employed, I had the strongest why. I was willing to be as uncomfortable and struggle for however long it took. I really decided I'll never work for anyone other than myself, because I trust myself implicitly. Even if it takes me longer, I wanted to be in complete control of my journey, both financially and all of the other things that come with work, location of where I work, time that I work, and I work a ton, but I'm in the driver's seat. We're just going to go with the car analogies all day long.
all day long.
So I had the strongest why. Tony Robbins has a great quote: if you want to take the island, burn your boats. And I had a strong enough, hard enough why to be willing to burn my boat. And in fact, did take the island, which is where I would say that I'm now. I want to add something to a point that you made earlier, this concept of taking so much action that you don't have time to like dip down into the vulnerability hangover of action, right? So you put yourself out there in a new way and like the discomfort rushes over you. Like, oh my God, that was so uncomfortable. I can't believe I did that. What are people going to think? They're going to have all these opinions. I don't know. At least that's how it was when I started putting myself out there. more publicly on LinkedIn, online, through networking, all of those things. And it felt so icky in the beginning, for lack of a more impressive term. And I started to learn that if I just took more action, I'd really just coast on like the excitement of that like adrenaline rush almost, of like doing webinars and meeting more people and just riding that wave and really avoiding the lower dips. So I think if you're having all of this time where you're able to sit and kind of stew in the discomfort, consider taking more action where you're almost distracting yourself from it. Gag and go so often that you don't have time to really wallow in the river of misery.
I'm sure you've had this experience where we like having control over things. I mean, even if it's a bad thing, it's more comfortable to be in a
For sure.
situation where you have control. But that's what really resonates with what you're saying, as the action gives you a sense of control, and so that you can build upon that motivation and continue to be compelled by your why. So I really like that, creating those situations where you might not have control over the, big picture or the end outcome, or at least you feel like you don't at the time because you're down in that valley, but you can have control over these smaller, finite action steps to keep you going. So I really enjoyed that.
And let's revisit that, because what Olivia talked about at the top of the show was kind of a roadmap of how you kind of go about this goal idea. And we've talked about kind of finding your end result, your why, the road to it being likely full, or almost 99% chance full, of ups and downs and, different intentions and feelings, and being aware of that. Let's back up to the tangible stuff that you talked about. You've identified your goal. You've identified a strong why. Your next step is to break it down into actionable items, or do you pick a time frame first?
I think all goals should have a time frame, because that's what brings up the mind trauma. Like, it's really great to talk about like making a certain dollar amount, or getting a certain number of clients, or reading a certain number of books, right? Like, of course, everyone could read 52 books over the course of 52 years. Right. But when we add in, or just like 52 books in general, really, open-ended, the mind drama doesn't come up. When you add in a time factor, it's like, okay, well, then we get to break that down. If it's, a certain number of clients that you want to sign this year, if it's a certain amount of money that you want to generate for your firm, whatever the case may be, and you add a time factor to it, that's when mind drama comes up. So I think creating the result that's measurable and has a time element to it is really, really important here, because then you're going to start to see your thinking around it. Do I think that's possible? Do I think it's impossible? Do I think it's probable? Do I think it's inevitable? Inevitability is a really great place to be in, but you have to find thoughts that get you to feeling that something's inevitable. So definitely a time factor. And then you can break that down even further. So if it's a yearly goal, what does that look like over the course of each quarter? What does it look like over the course of a month? What does it look like over the course of a week? Right? How finite can you get it to really have that action plan where you know what you're doing and where you're at in your roadmap every step of the way? There should be like no confusion. Brains like to go into confusion about goals. So I don't know. I don't know thinking produces more not knowing as a result. So you want to make sure that if you do slip into confusion, I really like, it's such a quick mindset shift, but go from I don't know how to do this to I can figure it out. And how would you figure it out if you did know?
I've been using that lately, Olivia. I remember our conversation where I was avoiding something because I said I'm not techie. And you coached me into, how can you talk about that so that you're able to feel accomplished and get it accomplished? And so that's what it is now. And I'm like the IT director of my home because I can figure it out. I can figure it all out. I set up the TV.
So good.
You should see all the remote controls. And I set it up because I said, I can figure it out. I was curious and I was like, I can figure it out.
Yeah.
That's my motto. That's going to be my 2021 motto. I can figure it out.
I love that. It's such
Yeah.
a great thought to practice.
Well, let's go back. Let's break it down to an example, a very common example, which health, weight loss, however you want to do it. Let's just say, let's pick a random goal, 25. Somebody wants to lose 25 pounds by the end of the year. Talk about how this process would be applied to that. How would you go about breaking it down into actionable tips?
I would start by, I haven't mentioned this yet, and it's really important. I think it's really useful in this context specifically. But I think one of the biggest things with goal setting is practicing constraint. And at the start of a new year, I think people really like to get overly ambitious, perhaps, and set all of these goals. I really like to focus on one at a time, whether you want it to be one a quarter, one a year, or just one until you accomplish it, and then you can move on to the next one. It's not to say don't work on anything else, but really identify it as being the main thing. Because if you're spreading yourself that thin between all of these different goals, your focus wavers. So if that's the goal for the year, pick that as being the goal and put your most focus and attention on that goal. So from there, set a plan. So you'd reverse engineer that goal. What does that mean in terms of months? So 25, it's roughly 24. So that's like 2 pounds a month if you want to stretch it over the full year. Again, the timing brings up the mind drama. So you might have much different thoughts about the ability to lose 25 pounds in a year than you would 25 pounds in 2 months. I'm not suggesting anyone do that for health reasons, but it just brings up different thoughts, right? You might think one's totally possible or probable. You might think the other one's totally impossible, or you're just not willing to do whatever it would take. Like, I'm not suggesting anyone starve and, eat half a grapefruit once a week in order to accomplish that goal in such a small, tight time frame. So you want to gauge your thoughts about whatever the goal is and see if your thinking is set up for success. So 2 pounds a month feels totally doable, right? Now let's break it down. What does that look like as far as eating each week? What are you going to eat? What are you willing to give up? What are you willing to not compromise on? And really setting that plan. And then each week we go through that process of what worked, what didn't work, what would we do differently. Think about just applying that with only the focus, not just your life in general, but the only focus being that weight loss goal. You're going to see, what did I eat on Tuesday? Oh, I realized that I had, cake for a children's birthday party. That might be something that didn't align with the result that I had. I had planned to eat this and I wavered on the weekends. You're going to learn all of those things, again, not from judgment, but from curiosity, really getting to a neutral place and just observing, what did I do? Oh, I realized that when I'm working on a brief late at night, I eat whatever's in the fridge, and my husband gets Thai takeout, and Thai takeout doesn't support my weight loss goals, whatever the case may be. So finding those patterns where you either don't stick to the plan or go off, your protocol, whatever you had planned for, and then you make tweaks each week. So you might say no next time. Then what would you do differently? Might say, oh, now when I'm offered cake, I'm okay feeling rude because I care more about accomplishing my goal than I care about whether someone's offended that I didn't have the cake. Love cake, love them. One of my favorite sayings, I love you and no, right? I love you and no, I'm not going to eat pizza. I love you and no, I'm not going to go out and meet up with the girlfriends and slam, 4 glasses of wine, or a couple really like sugary chocolate martinis, things like that, right? Not that people are doing a ton of that in pandemic times anyways, but you get the point.
So, and I think that's a good exercise too, to actually go back and look at your larger goal. When you start to break down, like say that example of 2 pounds a month, that's half a pound a week. That's like, I don't know what calorie deficit that is. Not very good at math, I guess, or maybe I am, who knows, but whatever. So you're like, half pound a week. That sounds easy. I could probably do a little bit more. So maybe I'll shorten the goal. You get to go back and tweak, because it makes you really think about that larger goal and the time frame that you set. Can you tweak the time frame? And I love that idea that you break it down into smaller steps that you can get your head wrapped around, versus just I'm going to lose 25 pounds. All right, what's the next step? What's per month? what's per week, what do I need to do per day to get to that weekly goal, what do I need to do
Mhm.
per meal to get to the daily goal. Like you just keep breaking it down until you can't break it down anymore. And then you constantly, like that phrase, always be learning, always be tweaking. Like I
Mhm.
love your saying, and I'm not going to get it right, but where you're either succeeding or learning. Like I
Yep.
love that idea that you're not failing. You didn't get it right, so you learn from that. Next time you will. I think that's beautiful.
One of the things, it's probably my favorite concept to coach on, is explaining and teaching that concept that failure is always a thought. And it's just one that doesn't serve you to think. And once we know it's a thought, we can opt to not think it. We can opt to not think that we're failing. To go back earlier to where goals get abandoned, as soon as you think you're failing at something, very shortly thereafter is typically when people quit. And failure is only a thought that becomes available to you when you've entertained the idea of quitting, because failure requires an end point from which you measure. So if you're on a weight loss journey and you're like, I'm failing, this isn't working, it's you're using real time as your measuring point, right? You've decided that based on whatever the results are right now, I've failed. It hasn't worked. So you're taking that endpoint and using it against yourself. What does it look like when you totally take quitting off the table? It's my best advice for anyone preparing and going into 2021 with a goal that they have a hard why for, that they're really passionate about achieving, that they feel compelled to achieve. My next step there is take quitting off the table, constrain, focus on the one thing, and then take quitting off the table. How would you approach your goal if you couldn't quit, if it was physically impossible for you to quit? What I tend to see with people is that the mind drama becomes essentially eliminated. You would just go about it so much more consistently to take action to create that result if you truly could not quit. So create that mindset for yourself. Just decide, I'm sticking with this as long as it takes me. I did that with my business. I was like, I don't care how many times I have to do this in a way that doesn't work for me to figure out how it works, right? Same thing with Talar's great example. I don't care how many YouTube videos I need to watch to figure out how to set up the TV, but damn it, I will learn how to set up all of the tech, right? I will figure it out. If we really take that approach towards whatever our main goal is that we're constraining in and focusing on, I will figure this out. I will not quit. Quitting's not an option. Everything gets really less dramatic and really more clear. And we just go about it again from that curiosity of like, well, what could I have done differently? Oh, I see where I misstepped here. I see where I could have, I can try this. And again, tweak. I like the phrase act, audit, adapt. Act, audit, adapt. So take the action, audit it, evaluate through that what worked, what didn't work, what are you going to do differently? And then adapt. Take that what didn't work and put it into action. See if those tweaks make a difference.
You have identified your result. You found the why for the result. You're prepared for a journey that isn't always going to feel and look great. And you have taken failure off the table and you have a plan in place. Then I think a step of it is what's inspired this podcast is how you talk to that goal. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So think about if you're saying, I can't ever do this. This is impossible. This won't work. It's too much of a long shot. I see people with money goals. They think that they're not even a person who's deserving of having those results. So all of that negative chatter, which your brain is designed to do. But what does it look like if you change all of that negative naysaying thinking to, I can totally do this. I definitely have this in me. I don't care how long it takes. I'm committed to accomplishing this result. I'm committed to attaining this end goal for myself. It's going to be fun. What a great thought to practice. This is going to be fun. This is going to be scary, but that's okay. I love adding that's okay to the end of what might seem like a limiting belief or something that doesn't ultimately serve you. We could just take that's okay and slap it on the end of it. And that moves the dial a little bit to create a more positive emotion that will fuel more positive action to create a positive result. Because if your thoughts are negative, your results will be negative. If your thoughts are positive, your results will be positive. So I think it's really, you guys hear me talk about this all the time, but do a thought download. See what's going on up in your brain. You will not know what you think about a goal until you write down your thoughts. We like to think like, oh, we could just hold space for it all upstairs in our cabeza. But I find that to not be the case. I think I always compare it with women as like a tangled necklace, where the chain's tangled and you have to, take the ends of your nails and like slowly try and work it apart. That's what our brains look like with all the thoughts that we're thinking about a goal, about something that we hope to achieve. And I'm glad I just used the word hope. So I'll talk about some words in a second that I think shouldn't be anywhere near goal setting. And hope is certainly one of them. But do a thought download about all of the thoughts you think about your goal, about your ability to accomplish your goal, about how long it takes, about your progress thus far. Do thought downloads throughout this process. Don't just do it at the very beginning. Do a weekly check-in, a monthly check-in, thought download to see what's going on up there and write down your list. I think 10 minutes is a fine amount of time to do this. This doesn't need to be an hour-long process, but do the thought download about your goal and see what's going on there. And then in parentheses, next to each sentence you write down, I want you to ask yourself, how do I feel? What one word emotion do I feel when I think this thought? And you're going to see so clearly the thinking that causes you to feel discouraged, the thinking that causes you to feel frustrated, the thinking that causes you to feel confused versus the thinking that causes you to feel inspired, the thinking that causes you to feel driven, motivated, compelled. And we want to eliminate the thoughts that make us feel the negative emotions. So I like to do that by asking 3 questions. Question number 1, to eliminate limiting beliefs. Is this thought true? The answer's always no. So is this thought true? No, it's not. Second question, why am I choosing to think it? And this again goes back to the concept of like your brain's not your best friend. Your brain's probably serving that thought up to you to get you to seek temporary pleasure, conserve energy, and avoid discomfort, right? So with those 3 things in mind, why are you choosing to think this? And then from there, what could I choose to think instead? What's a stronger thought? What's a more powerful thought that I could replace this with? I think those are really 3 powerful questions, and you'll see those patterns. You're going to see where your beliefs weak. Sometimes we think negative thoughts and we don't even realize it. So a great example of that, words that we shouldn't use in goal setting and goal pursuit and achievement. Hope. I hope I can do this. Oh, that feels awful, right? Hopeful is not a powerful emotion. You think of like compelled, driven, motivated, focused, determined. Hope. Hope's better than discouraged and defeated. Don't get me wrong, if we're using a sliding scale, but hope doesn't drive massive action. Hope's kind of like a big old question mark when it comes to pursuing and achieving goals. So hope's one, want is another one. I want to do this. I want to be X. I want to be Y. Wherever want is, thoughts with want or need create results that leave you wanting and needing more. So being really mindful of, again, the way we talk about goals, if you're like, I want to do this, really that just indicates to me that you think you can't, that it feels too far removed. Think about the powerful difference between, I will use the weight example again. I want to lose weight. I need to lose weight versus I'm losing weight. Like if you are in the mindset of I'm losing weight, even before you've lost a pound, you're setting yourself in such a different way. I want to sign, 3 new clients this year. I want to make, generate X amount of money in business for my firm versus I am doing that. One thought, it's just one word difference. We're taking out the want, we're taking out the need, but that shift is everything because it totally changes, again, that energy that you bring with you into the action that you take. And that's everything.
I think the need want thing is so powerful. It's something that you and I have worked on this year. I'm still in the need front. I feel like need's slightly worse than want, maybe not. But when I've noticed myself, the terminology that I've used, I need to do this. I'm very much catching myself every time I say it and catching the negative talk and what words can I use that would have a different impact. It reminds me just last week, so I did a podcast episode a couple weeks ago where I said something wrong. Like I just misrepresented a fact. And I didn't catch it at the time, but the podcast aired. I'm like, oh, I said that. It's so stupid. And I was saying the story to my husband, and my daughter was in the room, and I was like, oh, I'm so dumb. And I went, no, I'm not. I'm not dumb. I made a mistake, and that's okay. Like I just changed it because I was like, I'm not, if I carry that energy with me, I won't do another podcast episode. Like I have to be okay making mistakes. That doesn't reflect who I am. It's just something that happened in that moment. But it's a journey once you start to pay attention to the thoughts in your head, how you speak to yourself, the things that you say to yourself or out loud about yourself are really important. And the need want front is there. I did the same thing a couple of years ago when I set goals for business development goals. It was very much driven by money. Like this is the dollar figure I want to be at. This is how much money I want to generate, business I want to generate. And it was that once, like, but now it's like I'm getting 2 new clients this year. Like it's definitely changed over the past 6 months, and it feels different. There's a confidence, a clarity, a certainty. I don't know what the right word is that comes along with the right words. Words do matter. And I think that's the part of your post that inspired this podcast that struck me. How you talk to yourself matters.
Correct.
And it really, in the concept of goals, especially so, how you talk to yourself, how you talk to your goal, take some time to do that. Like you say, thought download, and start there, because that's where things change, as the awareness spot.
I completely agree with you. I think the awareness is everything. I always tell my clients that. Like the biggest thing you will get from working with me is awareness as to what's going on in your brain and how it's responsible for producing every result you have in your life, whether you like the result or not, right? You really are in control of it all. You really do have autonomy and agency over all of it. So much of that has to be from just gaining that awareness over what you're thinking, how it makes you feel, what action it drives or doesn't drive, all that inaction too, and how it is responsible, how your thinking, feeling, and actions are responsible for producing that result. I think the point that you're making about the self-talk, not just about the goals, but about yourself, is so important. Talar brought it up earlier too, with like just thinking like, oh, I'm not tech savvy, I'm not a techie, right? What's so funny is that like she just proved that. So the thought isn't even true. It doesn't serve you. It makes you feel a negative emotion and, doesn't have you taking the massive action that you would need to take in order to produce the results that you want. But it also has the misfortune of just being false. She could make the argument that she is tech savvy, and we can find all the evidence for that, or she can make the argument that she's not. Why make the argument that you're not? Why make the argument that you're dumb? You can make that argument, or you can make the argument that you're not dumb. You'll find all this evidence to support that you're not dumb, right? You're a lawyer, for goodness sakes. Right? You've intelligently and successfully invested in real estate. All of that is counterintuitive to the concept of you being dumb. So if it's not true, why think it?
I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
I'm totally with you. Couple things wrapping up. Any last words on the goal front? I'll throw it to you, Olivia, first, and Talar, if you want to jump in. Any parting words of wisdom that you want to give to people that maybe we haven't covered, or you just want to reinforce to people that are setting goals in the beginning of 2021?
One thing that I haven't mentioned is the concept of being too vague. And I think that's really important. So when you're thinking about the result that you ultimately want to have, I want it to be measurable. I want it to be specific enough to where you define that. I'm always pushing people. They're like, I want to make more money. How much? Give me a number. I want to bring in more business. How much? What does that look like? Are there different ways to get there? Is it one client that will, generate enough business? Or is that 5 clients that will generate X amount of business? Really being much more specific. Anytime you have words like more, too much, less, none of those words are specific enough to really be measured. So, and what our brains love to do in those scenarios is, I don't know, but not this. I really like to call it like the horizon principle. of your brain just kind of looks around, does an audit, and it's like, whatever it is that we want, it certainly isn't this, not yet, not here, this isn't enough. So figuring out what enough is, figuring out what more is, figuring out what less is, using much more specific words to describe your goals so you can measure your progress along the way. If it's just like, oh, I want to lose less weight, or I want to lose more weight, I want to weigh less, right? If we don't have something where we're measuring that specifically, it's really hard to measure. And then our brain just goes straight to discouragement, because discouragement in the long run is more comfortable because it gets us to quit. So using words that are specific when setting goals.
And let me, while you're thinking, because that's what we did when we went on our real estate journey. When I found the why of financial freedom, this vague term, we want financial freedom. What does that mean? Well, it means we want our passive income to exceed our expenses. What does that mean? We had to take a hard look at our expenses. And so we found our overall monthly expenses and like, all right, well, we're going to add some cushion to it. Here's the dollar figure per month that we need to reach financial freedom. How do we get there? But that does start with the vague and making it real. But it's not, and it's often some work to be done, some research or digging or thinking or whatever it may be. But yeah, I love that. You being very specific about your goal. You can start vague, but then breaking it to a very identifiable goal that is measurable over time is very, very helpful.
You just reminded me of two things. I'm really glad that this came up. So the first is, again, going back to how we talk about goals, I want you to sit down and identify all of the obstacles that you believe stand in your way of creating that ultimate result. Those obstacles will ultimately become your strategy. So for real estate investing, I love that you brought up, like, there's some research that you have to do, right? Do you want to own an entire apartment building? Are you going to do like single family dwelling houses? What investments are you going to make initially? What does year 5 look like, right? Those are probably questions that you and your husband have answered by this point.
Oh yeah.
But there's some, what don't I know? Where would I get that information? Where would I find that out? What resources are there? Are there podcasts that I would listen to? I know you listen to Bigger Pockets. Are there other resources? Are there other experts that I can learn from? So lacking certain knowledge doesn't have to be a problem at all. Again, like Talar said, we can pivot to, I can figure this out. Where would I go in order to figure this out? What information do I lack? So that would be an obstacle. And then you solve for whatever that obstacle is. Oh, we don't have enough money to invest in this type of, dwelling. Okay, well, how do we get that? Do we have to reduce our spending? Do we have to take money out of a different account? Who knows, right? But whatever each obstacle is, you make a plan and you solve for that obstacle. And again, becomes your yellow brick road of accomplishing your goal. So obstacles, turning them into strategies, very important. Second item that I think I would be remiss to not add is, one of my favorite ways to really pursue an audacious goal is to skip over. I like to think of it in my head as like literally doing a mental leapfrog over the part where you think you can't do it. So I did this earlier this year for myself and my business. And an impossible goal, or what seems like an impossible goal for me, would be for me to make $1 million in 2021. And in August, I sat down and I said, okay, we're just going to leapfrog right past the part where I think I can't do it. If I was going to do it, how would I? And I forced myself to just sit and think through, what would that look like? What group coaching program would I offer? How would I be in front of enough people? How would I expand my audience throughout the year in order to have enough traffic to where I would, fully fill a really large group program? So those questions, starting a podcast is on that list. Having my email list get to a certain point, that would be one of like the micro goals that would fall within that much bigger picture. But really getting, because your brain has all of this wisdom and all of these incredible answers, but the first thing it throws at you is, I don't know. And it does it really is like a defense mechanism of like, it's probably going to involve some discomfort. We know that because we know that setting goals sometimes, typically has that discouragement and disappointment and frustration that we talked about. So it's like, I don't know. And then your brain wants to go run away. And I always encourage people to push past that. What would your answer be if you did know? And then go from there. If you quiet your brain, you will find some incredible wisdom. And then you start the process, act, audit, adapt, act on that wisdom, act, audit, and adapt, act, audit, and adapt. And you just repeat it until you get to the end.
I love that. It reminds me of, I'm a big fan of Tim Ferriss and the 4-Hour Work Week. If you haven't read that book, as a lawyer, it challenges a lot of the rules that you have in your head about how much you should work. But one thing he talks about in that book is dreamlining, is take the time. And if you had no concern with money or time or limitation or family or busyness or job, what would you want to do? Dreamline, take that time to skip over the how and go right to what would that be? How does that feel? And then you can back into it. I love that. And that's a great way to end the show, is like, take the time to really dream. And what if losing weight's your thing, what would it feel like to be the size or that you want? If it's a size, or maybe it's a health thing, what do you think that feels like? And it's a beautiful thing to let go of those limitations and just dream for a little bit. I think children do it so naturally. As adults, we tend to let go of that stuff. So let's dream a little bit. Before I let you guys go, I want you to tell me what you're reading now. I'm always fascinated with what the two of you are reading.
I'm reading Start With Why by Simon Sinek, and also The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer.
What's that one? I haven't heard that one.
He talks about meditation and like just, letting go. And it's just a meditation journey, it sounds like.
I'll throw mine in there while Olivia looks her up. I brought it down. Metahuman by Deepak Chopra. Holy crap, this book is blowing my mind. Like,
really?
If you want something to blow your mind, this is it. But I also, on the meditation front, I'm a big fan of his right now. I'm reading like everything is Total Meditation. If you are into meditation, he's got some great, it's just beautiful, his thought process around it. And he gives you some meditations at the end of the book, which really goes into what Olivia has talked about today, which is you ask yourself 3 questions. What am I doing right? What isn't working for me? And what is my next step? If you ask those questions of your goals, it is very much what Olivia's talked about, the adapt. And I just totally blanked on that phrase, but that's what it is. So.
All right, I'm going to have to add that to my list. Right now, I am reading 2 books. I'm in the middle, and I've taken a long time to get through it, but I love it. Thirst by Scott Harrison. I've really fallen into a love of, I wouldn't call him an addict, but with memoirs about either substance abuse struggles or issues and how people have overcome them. I think it's such an inspiring journey. So I read We Are the Luckiest earlier this year by Laura McCowan, which was phenomenal, so candid, really just gripping. I've really loved Thirst. He was a nightclub promoter, and he ends up starting the foundation Charity Water after he flees New York City, basically after too much time living a fast life, so to speak. And that story's been really inspirational, and to see how water shapes so many lives, or the struggle to get clean water, has been a really incredible story to read. So Thirst by Scott Harrison. And then I'm also reading Rethinking Infidelity by Esther Perel. For anyone who hasn't seen her TED Talk, can't recommend it highly enough. Also, she has the most lovely French accent. So by all means, go listen to that. But I really love topics that challenge the way that we as a society are taught to think about it. I think that's one of the things that I love about coaching, of it's all our thoughts, right? So we can choose to think the ones that serve us. I think a lot of our societally influenced thinking around infidelity is really negative and really limiting. And I'm enjoying reading about different ways to think about that and kind of challenge the brain.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I have to say thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. We could talk about this all day long. The mindset, because the mindset around goals and life and it's just a journey, and it's a beautiful thing to talk about. I will also say I'll drop a plug for Olivia. I don't know if she has any spots open, but I know I think she had one spot open for coaching. She is booking up. If you are looking to take 2021 to a different level than 2020, get her on the phone and hire her right away. She will not be available, if she even is anymore, but make sure you get in her funnel and program, because it's unbelievable. I will speak for Talara and tell you that it has changed our lives for the better. And I love the work that we do together. So make sure you seek her out, check out all of her stuff on LinkedIn, her content, I think you have a couple now, weekly webinars. You have so much going on. I can't even keep track of it, but definitely check her out. And make sure that you tune in on the next episode of the Defense Never Rest. We will see you guys then. Take it easy.